OpenAI has released its official API. In this video, I'm going to walk you through everything right from getting started with using the Python API, how the request and response should be structured, and dive into the parameters you can send in the request. I've also developed a demo app using Streamlit to play around with different parameters you can pass to the API. If you're a developer and would like to learn about how the ChatGPT API works, this video is for you. To get started, first thing you have to do is hit the platform.openai.com website and you'll have to create a login. So here I've already logged in. So the next step is to create an API key. In order to do that, we can go under the manage account, and on the left you can see there are a few, there's a link to create the API keys. I've already created an API key, so it shows the list of secret keys that I have got. If you're not, you can always click on create new secret key and create an API key. So the next step is to create a directory for our project. So once we are in the directory, I'll then be creating a virtual environment using Conda. Now that the virtual environment is created, I would like to activate it. So we'll have to install 3 packages inside the virtual environment. So first is, of course, the OpenAI. Then we'll have to install Streamlit, because using Streamlit, we're going to build the app. Let's also install Jupyter Lab for running notebooks. So now that we have installed OpenAI and Streamlit, and we also installed the Jupyter Lab, let's start playing around with the API. So we need to start with importing OpenAI and OS. So we need the OS because we need to set the API key. I have set the environment variable with the API key for the variable API key. So I'm just setting it to OpenAI API key. So once we do that, we are now ready to send the request up. So one of the features that the API provides is to list the models. So if you do openai.model.list, you should be able to list all the models. But it's not quite well structured. Like, as you can see, the response is pretty much like a JSON response. So I'm taking out just the data from that, and I'm iterating through the data, and I'm just displaying all the IDs, which is just the ID of the models that OpenAI has got. So if we just run that, then it lists all the IDs here. For example, you've got the GPT 3.5 Turbo, which is the latest model that they have. So once I got familiar with the different models, I went through the API documentation to find out what are the different possibilities with the API. So currently you can input text or images or audio as input, and you can also provide prompts in order to process these inputs. So when it comes to text, you could do a completion where you could provide part of a sentence as input and ChatGPT will complete it for you. Or you could do a chat completion where you initiate a topic and you could keep conversing with ChatGPT in order to continue the conversation. And then you could do edits where you could ask ChatGPT to proofread your sentence or paragraph, and ChatGPT will edit the sentence or the paragraph in order to fix any typos or any problems with the sentence or the paragraph. You could do image generation where you could just give a prompt and ask a DALL-E model to give an image as the output, or you could give an image and also provide a prompt, and the model will modify the image or edit the image in order to provide you with a generated image. Then comes audio, with which you could either transcribe your audio into text, or you could translate your audio into a different language, and the output will be the translated text. And there are other advanced options like embeddings and fine tunings, where you could provide a model and you could sort of fine tune or modify the model for your specific data. Once I got familiar with the different models that are available, I started playing around with completion. So in order to request for any completion, we first have to create a openai.completion.create object, and we just have to pass the model, which is a required field, and we'll get any response back from that. So when I just passed the model to the ChatGPT API, the response was interesting. So every time it gives something unique. For example, in this case, it is given O'Reilly has published an article on optimization of dynamic web application on Apache. So if I send it again, it's going to give me another response. Panama Express is an American Chinese cuisine fast food restaurant chain serving Chinese steak, and it just ends abruptly. To get a sensible response, we actually need to pass a prompt. So in my case, I'm just passing, I went to the zoo and saw. Let's see what the response is. A lot of different animals. I saw elephants, lions, tigers. Great. So if I want to control the number of tokens that I get back in the response, I just need to set the num tokens. In my case, I'm setting it to 20. Let's see what happens. So it completes with saying a variety of animals, including lions, tigers, zebra, monkeys, giraffe. Great. So the next two parameters are quite interesting. The first one is the temperature, which controls how random your response is. It can range from 0 to 2. So, and it's a float variable. So if I just pass 1, let's see what happens. The response is quite sensible. But if I set it to 2, an elephant, A for bear, zoology, yeah, I'm just not able to make out anything sensible. So it gets highly random and the model starts blabbering something instead of giving something quite sensible. So if we reduce the temperature to quite a low figure, let's say 0.1, yeah, it gives something really sensible. It completes with saying, I went to the zoo and saw a variety of animals, including lions, tigers, giraffe, zebras, which makes quite sense. The top P is also an interesting parameter. So it goes along with the temperature. The documentation says we either should change the temperature or change the top P. So I'm going to now change the top P. So the top P value is a probability value. So it ranges from 0 to 1. Let's see what happens if we set it to 0.99. So the response is quite sensible. When we set echo to true, it basically sends the prompt back along with the response. So as you can see, it is sending back, I went to the zoo and saw, and then it also sends a response, which is a variety of animals, including lions, tigers, giraffes, and zebras. The parameters best of and n are interesting and they go hand in hand. So when you set best of to a value, all it does is it generates that many responses, and n decides how many responses you get back. So in this case, ChatGPT generates 3 responses and sends back 2. So if you run this, you can see that I get the prompt along with the 2 responses. Now if I set n to 1, obviously I'll get 1 response back. And the other thing to note is that best of cannot be less than n. So if I set n to 2, and if I set best of to 2 as well, that should be fine. But if I set best of to 1 and n to 2, obviously I'm getting an error because it's only generating 1 response, but you're asking it to give back 2 responses, which is not feasible. So the frequency penalty ranges from -2 to +2, and it mainly penalizes the frequency of words occurring in the same sentence or in the same response. So for example, when the frequency penalty is 2.0, it's pretty high. Let's find out what happens. You will see that none of the words are repeated. Like if I set that to -2, which is a pretty low number, basically you're not penalizing the system for frequently using the same words. You could literally see so many commas coming in the end, just because the frequency penalty is so low. So presence penalty is similar to frequency penalty, but presence penalty applies to all the tokens that have been sampled before, whereas the frequency penalty is something that considers each token separately. The presence penalty also ranges from -2 to 2. And let's see what happens if we run the presence penalty at 2.0. So when the presence penalty is -2, you can see that it's very reluctant to change the topic because it's considering all the past tokens together. Whereas if we change that to +2, it's trying to open up new topics, like for example the responses, I saw a lot of amazing animals at the zoo. There was a playful group of monkeys, giraffes munching on the leaves, elephants cooling off in their pool, and it goes on and on. Just by changing the presence penalty to -2, the text somewhat gets a little bit boring. It says like, I went to the zoo and saw a lot of animals. I saw some lions sleeping in their enclosure. So some monkeys playing in the trees, a flock of flamingos, and it goes on and on. So basically, I think the language of the response is controlled by the presence penalty. When it comes to chat completions, it's more of a conversation. So firstly, you'll have to initiate a chat completion object instead of just a completion object. So, and the model that you'll have to use for that is GPT 3.5 Turbo. This is the latest one that they have released quite recently. And the message that you're sending is now a list of dictionary. So the first message should be that of a system, where you say the role is system and the content is the topic that you want to have a conversation on. For example, in my example, I've just initiated the system to be a comedian. So if I run that and I initiate the conversation, and when it comes to asking the question, so the role that is taken by you is a user, and whatever the message that you pass to it must be passed to the role user, and the response that you get comes as an assistant. And so here the logic that I have done is sort of appending the response that you get from the bot, and then I'm just sending everything back to the request in order to get the next response. So that's why I've just put everything in a loop. Let's see what happens if we ask it to say, for example, an Easter joke. Wow, that's interesting. So why did the Easter egg hide? Because it was a little chicken. Wow, okay. Let's ask it to tell another joke because this is not very exciting. Okay, now it's just swaying away from the topic and say, why don't scientists trust atoms? Because they make up everything. Wow, okay, that's interesting. So the parameters for chat completion are pretty much the same as that of completion. So I'm not going to go into the details of those. Like you can say temperature, topi, n, and this max tokens again. So the presence penalty, frequency penalty, etc., etc. So whenever you want to make some corrections to text or even some code, then you'll have to use the edit function. So you'll have to create an edit object. So you'll have to pass the model, and you'll have to pass the input text as an input parameter. And you'll have to also tell the instruction as to what needs to be done with that. So if you pass these, and then the response will actually be the corrected text or the corrected code that you are providing. So in this case, because we are dealing with text, so the model to use is Text DaVinci Edit 001, and they've also provided a model for correcting the code, which is Code DaVinci Edit 001. When it comes to image generation, they are using the DALL-E model, and The inputs that we'll have to provide is the number of images that we need in the response, and also the size of the image that you want. So currently they're supporting only 3 dimensions, 256 by 256, 512 by 512, or 1024 by 1024. So the response comes as a URL. You can always open the URL and find out what the image is, or you can process the URL to in order to fetch the image. So I asked it to provide an image of a frog sitting on a horse. Let's find out what it has given. So you can see that the response I got is not quite a frog on a horse, but something similar to a horse, but a frog sitting on it. And the second image that I got is a frog literally sitting on another frog. So clearly they have mentioned that they are in beta, and it turns out it's the case. So when it comes to audio, currently there are 2 possibilities. We could either do transcription or we could do translation. So when it comes to transcription, the main input that we'll have to provide is the audio file, which is a recording of your speech. And we will also have to provide the model, even though currently only one model is possible, which is Whisper 1. And optionally, you can also provide a prompt. The prompt will be used to just guide the model when it comes to, say, translation. And there is a temperature parameter. So when it comes to speech, it ranges from 0 to 1. And it looks like the higher the temperature, the output will be more random. I have spoken the words. When I went to the top of the mountain, the views were amazing. So let's find out what the transcription is. There you go. So we have the transcribed text for the speech that I just did. And when it comes to translation, it's pretty much the same. Say, for example, if you're giving a French speech, you just have to give the prompt to say that it's from French to English. I've created a demo app that shows the possibilities of the API. On the left, you can navigate to different pages and play around with any of the tasks that we just went through. For example, if we go to image generation and say a beautiful spring day with colorful flowers, and ask it to generate 2 images at the resolution 512 by 512. Let's see what the response we get. So we got a couple of images precisely with what we asked for. And let's go to text edit and ask it to correct the sentence, "What a week it's been." So I've deliberately made a mistake. I'm now going to ask to correct the sentence. Let's see what the response we get. It's just saying "what a week." That's weird. So let's see what it says now. If we again change it differently, let's find out what happens. Okay, it's finally got it right. What a week this is. So you can also click on restart, and then you could just sort of give another input, and then you could keep going on and on. So all this is free for you to download, play around from my GitHub repository. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks then. Bye.